Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to the EPCOT International Food and Wine Festival. My name is Katie Farmond, and I am the editor of Edible Orlando magazine. But 2 days a week, I get to come out here and do this. I am a cookbook co-author, so I've cooked on this stage before, but this year is my first year getting to be the hostess of these great demos. So today we have a really awesome girl, Chef Jennifer, lady. Chef Jennifer Denlinger, who is a culinary educator, and she also has a really great website called floridachef.net. And Jennifer specializes in Florida cuisine. So how many of you are Floridians? Okay, not many. How many of you have a really clear idea of what Florida cuisine is? Okay, that's kind of me too. Even if I'm born and raised in Florida, and I still couldn't tell you precisely what Florida cuisine is. I'm not sure that Jennifer can say precisely exactly what it is either, but she's here to tell us a little bit more about that and to make a lovely fish dish for us. So please help me welcome Chef Jennifer to the stage. So thank you for being here. And to get us started a little bit on your research and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Thanks, Katie. My research right now is on the history of food in Florida, and my goal is to take what we know was eaten, the cuisine at the time when the European settlers reached our land was documented, and looking at what the Florida Department of Agriculture says is today's top crops, and try to figure out how we got to where we go. So I'm working from actually both sides, and I'm hoping that I can find a place where I can meet up in the middle. I spend every spare second that I can at farms and ranches and processing facilities, getting to know and creating a bond with the different people who produce what we eat on a daily basis. And through that, I've learned a great deal about food and about Florida and why it is what we have. And then what I get to do for fun is I get to do their promotional events. So let me tell you, I got the cooking in the middle of a field thing down to a pat. Okay, this is easy. I do a lot of work out in the fields, helping them harvest and then showing consumers how to best utilize the product that they come up with. Basically creating chef recipes that are friendly enough for everybody to make at home on a daily basis. I work a lot with seasonality of products and helping people understand why the Florida agriculture and aquaculture is so important to today's economy, because it really is. It's quite an important thing. And today I chose to do for you some very significant Florida items that are in season right now. And Florida's seasons aren't always too distinct. I've been praying every day for like something lower than 70 degrees. Please.
Lower than 80 maybe.
Maybe
even
even 80. I'll be
80.
happy with 80, lower than 80. But it is fall, and so we're going to work with some fall ingredients today. I have what's called tile fish, which is a super yummy, meaty fish, a little bit more meaty than mahi. You can buy it in the grocery stores just fine here in town. You can have the fishmonger and butcher fillet it for you. The fish itself is about that big. It's very, very large. It's very tasty. We've got Brussels sprouts. We get a little twist on Brussels sprouts, which is a crop grown here in Florida. And if you go out and you get a tour of the land pavilion, get on the boat ride, they'll show you Brussels sprouts growing. Last time I was there, they usually have those growing. We're going to make a shallot jam. Okay, and then we're going to do something called beurre blanc, which I have listed as lemon butter sauce. It is a classic French butter sauce that you have probably had before. And we are going to cook some farro, which is one of the oldest grains that we know about on the earth. It is a variety of wheat that you eat whole.
Well, that sounds fantastic. A lot of little elements, and it's all going to come together in a beautiful dish.
Yes, it is.
What do we start with?
Well, with all the different components, one thing that you have to do when you cook is you have to understand that different food takes different amount of times to cook. So even though it might be the last thing that goes on the plate, sometimes you have to start it first. And for me, the thing that I'm going to start first is actually the farro. and I'm not sure where my camera is located here, but it's a large grain, and it's very similar in texture to barley when it is cooked. It is from Egypt. So if you've ever heard of the word farina, farina is ground up farro. And you can buy it in the grocery store, sometimes in the specialty food section. It has become one of my favorite dishes to eat, one of my favorite grains. It's very easy to make. It takes a long time. So for the farro, we just need a little bit of butter in the pan.
So you're going to toast it first? Is that why you start
I'm
with
going
a little butter?
to add the grain, and I'm not really going to toast it. It is pretty toasty as it is, but I want to coat all the grain with the butter. Then we're going to add some chicken stock. Now you could always use water, or you could use vegetable stock if you wanted to. And we're going to add some herbs, and we're just going to let it go. It could take 30 to 45 minutes depending on your stove. But it's going to be a wonderful, meaty texture. So that's the very first thing that we're going to work on.
And it's used a lot, I know, in Mediterranean cooking, and my in-laws are Palestinian. My mother-in-law uses that a lot too. So it's used kind of throughout the Mediterranean, and like you said, it's from Egypt, so it's kind of that region. It's really typical there, but it's kind of finding its way into our markets now.
It is. And if you couldn't find this, if you go to a specialty grocery store, you can definitely find it, but you could very easily substitute out for barley. That would be probably the closest substitution in taste and texture for this dish. Other similar grains would be something called kamut, which is another very old grain, or just plain wheat berries. Now, because it is from the wheat family, there is gluten in it. However, it's not the same. If you're trying to do the gluten-free, it's a little bit different form, because when you have flour that's processed, the two proteins, when mixed with water, combines the gluten, whereas this has the two proteins still intact. So it's going to be a different form of gluten than if you get a wheat flour.
Has anybody here ever worked with farro before? Okay, so only a couple of you. So this is a new experience. I know that the grain section at my supermarket is kind of slowly growing. I'm seeing quinoa. I'm seeing these ancient grains. So it's kind of nice to know how to make them. And it sounds pretty similar to rice or any kind of grain that we would make like that.
All right, so I've got the butter melted. And when you cook any type of starch, you always have to season it at the beginning. Think about mashed potatoes. If you don't put the salt in at the beginning with the water, it's never going to get into the center of that starch grain, and it will never be salty enough. Okay? You don't have to use a lot of salt, but we want to add a little bit of salt here at the beginning. And I like to add a little bit of pepper. For this, I'm going to add a little bit of fresh thyme, just for flavor. You could add a bay leaf if you wanted to. You could add a pinch of dried thyme if you couldn't find this. Any of that would work.
How about rosemary or something? Is there a guide on what kind of herb you like for something like that?
Well, you could really put whatever you want to in there. I know thyme is going to taste well with the rest of our dishes today. You could do rosemary, just a little bit. Rosemary is very, very strong. Okay? Now we've got our chicken stock. And the proportion, it's 1 part of grain to 3 parts of liquid, approximately. And of course, if the grain is older, it's going to be more dehydrated, so you might need more grain. And if you have, a wonderful stove that's maybe supercharged, it might need less because it's going to cook faster. You can also do this in a steamer, like if you have like a steaming pot. I have not done it, but I have been told that you could do it if you have like a little rice steamer. So we're going to let this go for a little while.
Let me boost it up for you there, and we
right.
can turn it back down when you're ready for it. This is our very fancy, anybody at home cook on induction? So it takes a little bit of learning, but we're getting there.
So the next thing that I want to start is the shallot jam. And it's not as a pectin set jam as you would think about for your toast, but it's going to be a very thick consistency of a sweet and sour condiment. And it's really, really easy to make. The hardest part is cutting shallots, okay? So this is a shallot. This one has already been peeled. It's actually a really large shallot. Usually they're a little bit smaller. They come in like a brown, really thin brown paper, I guess is the right way for it. And if you can't, you can buy them in the grocery store. If you can't find them, you could use a little bit of onion. It won't be quite the same. The shallots, the taste is not so oniony. It's more earthy in my opinion, and it also depends on when the shallot is harvested. So for your shallot, just like you would an onion, I'm actually cut this one in half because it's really large, is you just want some little dice of it.
So you're dicing it pretty finely, I see there.
Yes. And if your knife cuts are a little bit chunkier, it's okay. I'm not going to be the one to judge.
There is no shallot judge that's going to come to your house and say, you didn't cut this in precisely the tiny little cubes.
And if you don't feel comfortable using a knife like this, use your little knife. Okay, that's okay. So that's how you cut your shallot. Now, for this, have you guys ever had French onion soup before? How many people here have made French onion soup before? What's the hardest part of making French onion soup? Getting the color on the onions. So this is why we're starting this one second, because we need our shallots to get nice and brown. So
Patience is a virtue in cooking. It's a virtue that not many of us possess, including myself. But
so that's where we're going to get our good flavors. We're going to slowly brown the shallots, and I cut shallots, okay? Once our butter gets melted, and it will melt here as we go. This is something that could very easily be made in advance. Keep it in your fridge. You can use it for all sorts of different dishes. It would taste really awesome on chicken.
I love that. I love a make-ahead. That's one of my favorites. Oops, here, let me help you with that.
Okay. Coming unplugged. So with the shallot and the butter, I'm going to get it nice and brown. My goal is to get it about the same color as light brown sugar. Okay? And it will take time. If you turn up your heat too high, you're going to end up burning it. What we want to do is coax out the sugar, coax out the flavors for this. So we're just going to set it, but don't forget it, but just set it, and we'll come back and stir it for a while. We're going to let it get that really nice brown color, and then we're going to add some vinegar and some sugar. If you can see, this is the color of what we're going for right here.
So about how long does that take at home?
Well, the batch I made for you guys today, which was quite large, it took not cutting the shallots, but actually cooking it took me about 30 minutes to get the good color for it. But that was also a very, very large batch. Okay, so we're going to get this going right here. I'm going to clean up my shallots.
So Jennifer, do you have an opinion on what is Florida cuisine?
Well, Florida cuisine is something that needs to grow naturally in the environment. Now, with today's agricultural standards, you almost always have to have some vigilance with it in order to mass produce all your food. Florida cuisine is very readily able to grow in the environment by itself or with just a little bit of help. Some of our top crops include citrus, cabbage.
It's boiling away. I'm going to turn it down a little bit. Keep going. Keep
our citruses, our cabbages, our kales, strawberries. We're losing battle on strawberries and citrus right now, a little bit. Sugar.
Is there a dish that you think really kind of sums up Florida cuisine?
No, there's just so much to it. We have so much available to us. We are very high in cattle production. Unless you don't know if you know that. For a long time, we're number 1 in the state for cattle production. We're about number 9 right now. But it's very hard to judge because what we do with most of our cattle that we graze here then get shipped to the Midwest. So the numbers, there's a little bit of a skew in the numbers because what we start with cattle, if you ever driven out through the wilds of Florida, we have 9 million cows in the state of Florida right now. So most of those get shipped off to the Midwest to be further processed into beef. I think seafood is a great representation of Florida. We have more coastline than we don't have coastline from both the water, from the ocean and the lakes and some rivers. We have just started into Florida stone crab season, so if you're here in town and you can go get yourself some Florida stone crabs, they are absolutely wonderful. You can buy them in the stores, but if you go out to a restaurant that serves seafood, I would highly recommend Florida stone crab. It's only a very short period of the year that you can actually get them, but they're not only pretty to look at, but they're very, very fabulous to taste.
So good, so sweet. How many of you have had stone crab here?
I'm gonna turn this up a little bit.
So it's just one of those delicacies. So good.
Okay, so we have our 2 long portions started. We're also going to do some roasted Brussels sprouts. How many people here like Brussels sprouts?
Smart.
I didn't like
smart crowd.
I didn't like them as a kid, but now I really like them. So the Brussels sprouts, member of the cabbage family, and it actually grows on a long stalk. And people, when you read descriptions of the plant, they say it looks like a sleigh bell, like the rain, because they pop off on the side. These are green. They also make purple. They grow purple Brussels sprouts. And the color changes. It doesn't quite always say super purple, but as it changes, then as it cooks, the colors change a little bit. So this is really easy to do. You can use what's called a mandolin, or if you have the shredding attachment on a food processor, you put them through that. But all you have to do with your knife.
So just a nice thin slice is
just
the goal.
A nice thin slice all the way down. Okay. We call this, the term for this is called chiffonade. Okay. And as you can see, I have some Brussels sprouts ready to go. I'll put it in my pocket.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. And the Brussels sprouts. And
so after you've sliced them thin, now are you seasoning them? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, I'm going to put a little bit of oil in here and some salt and pepper, and then they go onto a sheet pan and into the oven.
I love the idea of slicing them thin like that before they go in the oven. I'm sure my favorite part is always the little brown bits that get kind of crusty.
That was exactly my goal, was to get them brown and crispy.
Perfect.
So we go oil, and then onto a sheet pan, and you can line it with parchment paper if you want to, or you can just keep it plain.
And parchment just helps it not stick.
Helps it not stick as much, yes. Correct. Oh, look, you guys get samples already. Lucky you.
It's because it all is already smelling so good up here. We don't want you guys to get too hungry.
Okay, and then this will go into a 400-degree oven until they're brown and crispy. And I recommend stirring them every couple minutes, because you'll notice the ones on the side won't be they'll be more done than the ones in the middle. So next I'm going to show you the fish. Actually.
So tile fish is not one that is super common, but I know it is becoming a little more common.
It's becoming a little bit more common. And like I said, tile fish is big. Like the fish they sent me yesterday was probably this big. It's the size of a salmon or larger, and it's gorgeous. The skin of the tile fish is black and white with yellow specks all over it. And it has it's got the texture of like a very, very firm mahi-mahi, if you're familiar with mahi-mahi. You can eat the skin of the tile fish, but you will need to get your butcher or fishmonger to take the scales off for you. Tile fish skin is really fantastic.
Any fishermen in the audience? What? Do you catch tile fish? Once. One time. All right.
Did you save it and eat it? Good. So our shallots are looking good, and my fish is in the cooler.
And do you have a favorite fish, Jennifer?
For Florida fish, I like black grouper. I like tile fish. Mahi-mahi is really good. The season is kind of hit and miss with that. Wreck fish is really pretty good if you can find some of that. Just depends on what your personal preference is. So this is the tile fish right here.
It's beautiful. It's so plump. And,
It's plump, and it has a little bit of a red line in it, and that's normal. Okay, if you have an aversion to that, just cut it out. It's just a little bit of the bloodline. And to do your fish, turn my heat up. You can sear it in a pan and then pop it into the oven, depending on how you like it. So when we go to cook the fish, we need to use a cooking oil. So that would be a vegetable oil or a canola oil. I would not recommend a olive oil, because this pan is going to get too hot and your olive oil will end up burning. I would not use butter if you could help it either, because it's going to end up actually burning before we get done with the whole thing. So to keep your fish in your pan from sticking, I hear a lot of people like, oh my God, I'm going to get it to stick, is you have to wait till the pan is scorching hot. And what happens is when the pan is scorching hot, it's going to actually sear the outside of the fish instead of letting it stick. So if your pan's not hot enough, it will actually, the pores of the fish open up and the water leaches out, and that's what causes proteins in general to stick. Same thing with steak, same thing with chicken. But because fish is so delicate, it's really important that you get your pan really, really hot. And what I have always explained to people, when you're looking for hot oil in the pan, you put the oil in when the pan's cold and you heat it up. So that way the pores of the pan also pick up the oil. But if I pick up the pan like this, it kind of looks like water on like a running down a window, rain on a window. If you put it in there and it just kind of falls down in a big blob, it's not hot enough yet. And then the rule of thumb is when you think your pan's hot, you give it another 30 seconds. That's like your window. And in a restaurant, when we do this, we don't sit and wait. Like I would have my entire station and the burners are on and the pans are just waiting there hot. So that's when you go to the restaurant and you want food and you get it really fast. The pans are already preheated. Lots and lots and lots of them at a time. So a little bit of salt and pepper. You hear it?
That's a good sound.
It's a good sound.
Yeah.
And you could, add some other flavors, some other seasonings to this.
You're just using salt and pepper?
I'm just using salt and pepper because I know with the rest of the fish, with the rest of the flavors on the plate, we're going to need just salt and pepper.
Yeah.
Now, what you don't want to do is touch the fish at this point. And I know you see chefs on TV and they're all like this. If you touch your fish, it's going to make it stick. You have to resist the urge to peek, to do anything like that. Same thing with steaks on a grill. If you want really nice marks on your grill for your steaks, you just have to it's hard to do, but you just have to let it sit.
It's that patience thing again, right?
Let's look at our...
So speaking of all the great flavors, what do you guys think so far? So far, so good? Lovely.
Yeah.
And you also have a taste of the Festival Chardonnay, which is a nice pairing, I think, for the dish. Chardonnay and fish generally go well together, especially something kind of meaty like the tile fish. And it is just kind of a nice, little bit fruity, a little bit oaky, but not too much. So we hope it's a good pairing. So is it tasting good together too?
So my shallots are looking quite good. We're almost there.
They do. They have they've gone from translucent to that nice golden brown.
Yeah.
Looks nice.
We'll give it just another more minute, and then I will add the rest of the ingredients for this right here. The last part of the dish is the lemon butter sauce. We call it a beurre blanc, and there's a little trick to it. So it's some chef's trade. Making beurre blanc, I will tell you though, it's not for the weak of heart. It takes a little practice, and I will tell you, I have broken more than one of the beurre blancs in my life. Never admit it to anybody else but you guys, so don't tell anybody.
And when you say broken, tell us what that means.
It separates. And is it pretty? No. But does it taste good? That's fine. But I've added to your recipe a trick of a trade. Normally, beurre blanc has to be done at the very last minute, and you can't hold it in a van. You cannot hold it at all. But there's a little trick that us chefs do for it. It's a super classic sauce, and you're supposed to use whatever wine you're drinking or pairing it with is how you is what wine that you use. You can use a red wine too. That would make it Beurre Rouge instead of Beurre Blanc. So for my fish, like I can see the sides, like it's gone from translucent to white, like right at the very bottom here. So that's how I know that I can peek. I can do just a little peek to see. Got a little bit of color on there. This is a fish spatula, so if you cook a lot of fish, this is your friend. It's very thin, the blade's very thin on there, so it's flexible. Like I can flex it so I can get in there and try to not jostle the fish a lot. So very gently,
Just like magic.
flip it over.
And this isn't even a nonstick pan, so I'm very impressed.
Flip it over just a little bit. And at this point, I'm going to finish it in the oven. These fillets are really, really thick, so if I kept it in the pan the entire time, the surface of it might get too much done, but if I put it into a hot oven, it's going to be, it's going to cook all the way through. And one thing about fish is that you don't have to eat it all the way, all cooked all the way through. It is okay to have it just slightly underdone. So my farro's looking pretty good.
Well, this is delicious. I perk of the job, I get to taste it as well, and it's fantastic. The Brussels sprouts are really, they kind of get sweeter, too, when you make them in that hot oven.
I think so. And the best way to tell if your farro is done is you just have to taste it, just like you would for rice, to see if it's good. It's almost there. All right. So for my shallots, what do you guys think about that shallot jam? It was the little brown on the side. Now on your tables, we did put out a couple flyers for my webpage. I do have more up front here. I'll be happy to share with you. This is where I put all my, I call them crazy adventures. And if you go through and read the section that says stories and adventures, you'll see why. Out in the middle of cow pastures, helping them try to, well, I really wasn't much help. I just kind of watched the cowboys try to move their cows. I told you, I got the cooking in the middle of the field thing down, where I visit all the farms. I listen to the farmers. They tell me how they grow what they grow and how it's produced. And that's always reassuring to me, because I'm like, I'm eating this food and now I can see it, and I know there's no funny business going on like that. I have a couple really great adventures coming up shortly in the next couple weeks, so I hope to add on there. I also have a huge section of recipes that I make with the products the farmers give me. So there's lots and lots of recipes. It's categorized by course, and you can also search, so you can do for ingredients. So like I developed a sauerkraut recipe, and that came about is because Farmer Hank gave me, he's like, here's some cabbage. Thank you, sir. I'm like, what am I going to do with 40 pounds of cabbage? You know, so I'm like, So that's how a lot of this comes up. So there's also a seasonality guide. So if you're here in Florida, there's a guide to what you can find. And if you're actually in Central Florida, there's a farmer's market guide in there to help show you where everything goes. One of the projects that I had as a culinary educator was that I had a newsletter called Food for Thought. So that showcased a lot of the foreign and exotic and really neat product like farro that I would use for my students. So it's almost like a dictionary of culinary ingredients, plus all sorts of contacts and resources. Now, for my shallots, I'm going to add some brown sugar. And for this, it's going to be to your preference. Like I have, what I made for you guys was equal parts of brown sugar and apple cider vinegar. But if you want it more sweet, put less vinegar. If you want it more tangy. And at this point, now that we've added the shallots and the vinegar, the sugar and the vinegar, you have to just be mindful of it because it will burn. turn your heat down just a little bit, and we're going to cook it.
And that kind of thickens it all up and gives it that really dark color, so it's beautiful.
So now you just have to be mindful of this. Stir it every once in a while. Don't, go mow your grass or anything while you're working on this. Just hang around for a little bit. My farro looks like it's done, so I'm going to shut this off and just let it sit. And I'm going to check my Brussels sprouts, and then I'm going to show you how to make the sauce.
So this is one of those dinners that it seems a little complicated when you're reading it on the recipe, but it's pretty minor work. It's just a lot of little steps. So it'd be a good one to enlist some help, maybe from your kids in the kitchen or.
Right. And I'm a firm believer that if you let your kids help you cook in the oven, help you cook, they're more willing to eat and try. Do you agree? And if you make the food pretty, okay? I do a lot of work with the Florida Department of Agriculture and their kid nutrition program. So I always get in on that, how can we get kids to eat the broccoli? Well, what if we do it like this? What if we do it like this? And if you as an adult, even if you don't like it and you say, here, try it, and if you're just like trying to get it down, but if they see mom and dad try whatever it is, they're going to be more willing to have an open mind. So lastly, I'm going to show you the lemon butter sauce. We call it beurre blanc. We're going to add a little bit of lemon juice to it. You can make beurre rouge. Beurre rouge is actually one of my favorites because it's with red wine, and it makes it really, really rich. It tastes very good with scallops. This lemon butter sauce is usually used for fish or chicken. Really wouldn't go very well with steak. It wouldn't hold up to that. So I have some shallots again. Here again, if you don't have shallots, you can use a little bit of red onion or white onion, very small. Okay, and I have some white wine vinegar, any non-sweet vinegar. You could use white distilled vinegar, though I don't recommend it, but if that's what you got. And then white wine, whatever wine that you would drink. So don't use, if it's not good wine to drink, you shouldn't be cooking with it. That's a rule of thumb. And we're going to get this reduced down. So here comes my, can you guys see the pan of the shallots, how it's starting to get thick? I'm going to give it a little stir. I think my fish is almost done.
How about any questions?
Yeah, ask me questions.
Yes. What temperature is the oven on?
I have, this particular oven is at about 350, 400. It needs to be a high heat, and I'm not going to give you a blanket temperature because every oven's differently. Like my oven at home, my oven at home gets really, really hot, so I have it a little bit lower. If you can use a convection, so the oven's with the fan, that would be very beneficial. But if not, it will just increase your cooking time just a little bit.
And is it the same temperature for the fish and the Brussels sprouts?
Yes.
Okay. So that's good. So you can kind of cook them together.
The Brussels sprouts just need to be crispy and the fish is just finished. So if you were going to do a dinner party, you could very easily sear your fish, put it into the refrigerator, and then at the last minute, pop it into the oven for just a couple minutes. The Brussels sprouts, you can do those in advance and then just reheat them at the time. You definitely can do the shallot jam in advance. The farro you could do in advance. It would be a little bit harder to reheat. To reheat a grain like that, you almost need to add more water and bring it back to a boil. And then the lemon butter sauce would probably be the only thing that you would have. I'm going to turn this up more.
It takes a little while for it to get hot, so you have to.
The lemon butter sauce is probably the only thing that you're going to want to do at that last minute because it's so temperamental. And I'm going to look at my fish.
That one's kind of a good show for your guests too, as you're come in the kitchen while I'm finishing up and make a little, and you make sure you call it beurre blanc and not lemon butter sauce. Yes. How do we avoid overcooking a meaty fish?
Well, for fish in general, I'm going to pull that out. You want to undercook it a little bit. So even when you go to a restaurant, your proteins are always undercooked because it goes onto a hot plate and then sits in a hot window. And there's something called carryover cooking. And that has to do with the thermal dynamics of heat. That's how food cooks. So if we start with it just slightly undercooked, it will carry over and finish cooking by the time it gets onto the plate. For me, with fish, it needs to be just a little translucent in the middle. To me, that's how I like my fish, so it's still moist. When you take your fork, you should be able to pull apart, and it should come off in big flakes. That's my definition of a perfectly cooked piece of fish.
Sounds about right to me.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. What else can we serve the jam with, and how long does it keep in the fridge?
I would serve it with chicken, honestly. You could serve it with like cheese, like on a cheese plate, or with some bread, with some charcuterie, I think. I guess we like that one. And in the fridge, the rule of thumb usually is unless you process it into a can, it's usually 1 week. But you could totally freeze it. Make it in advance and freeze it. So we're getting here. Now, so normally, when we do our lemon butter sauce, we're going to reduce this down a little bit more, and then we add butter. Just butter and butter and butter, and then guess what? More butter. And that's where it gets a little bit temperamental, because your pan can't be too cold and it can't be too hot. You have to find that sweet spot right in the middle. But the trick is we're going to add just a little tiny bit of heavy cream, and that's going to hopefully keep it from separating or breaking. And it's still okay when it separates or breaks, but it's not a creamy looking. It looks like melted butter with shallots in it.
Which is still delicious, just not what we were going for, right? Yes, ma'am, question. Great question. What is a non-reactive saucepan? What does that mean?
So a non-reactive saucepan is a pan that has some sort of coating on it, which makes sure it doesn't react to the food. So we have right here all non-reactive saucepans. We have either Teflon or Kevlar coated pan, and then we have a stainless steel pan. A reactive pan would be a copper pan or an aluminum pan. And so if you put vinegar or wine or anything acidic in that, it's going to have a funny chemical reaction. Most people probably have pans or pots like this.
So that was a great question.
Okay. So my reduction is almost done here.
So the goal for the beginnings of the sauce, are we reducing it by half or not quite?
Yeah, by about half. By about half works. I mean, you could really actually do your reduction in advance, too, if you had a party. You could get the reduction done and just heat it back up and add your butter at the very end. And we're going to add a little bit of lemon zest to ours because we want to make it lemon flavored.
And lemon zest is just the yellow part, is that right?
Just the yellow part of the lemon. And if you don't have a lemon for lemon zest, that's okay. Make it work for what you have. I know you can buy dried lemon zest, and you could do that. You just have to put it in the beginning. Can you guys see what the jam looks like now?
Yes.
I can tell that it's done because the size of my bubbles have gotten really small. And that means that the consistency has thickened up, and the bubbles that are coming out are very, very small. But if you're not sure, taste it. Carefully, because there's sugar in here, and so you don't want to burn your tongue. It's good. Maybe a little salt.
And that's the benefit of tasting as you go, too, is to make sure that you don't get to the very end and then it needs salt or it needs something else and you've missed it. So that's a...
Okay. So last, I'm going to add the butter to my pan, and we're going to make you a plate. So exactly what you just had up. So you can see that the liquid is almost gone. I'm going to add a little bit of cream. And I'm sure if there was a French chef here, they'd probably roll their eyes at me. But this is how we do it in a restaurant to make sure it works perfectly every time for you. So when this cream gets hot again, we're going to start adding butter. Your butter has to be cold, and it has to be whole butter. You can't use margarine or a butter substitute, and if it's too soft, it's going to melt too fast. So we're going to get this hot again. And I'm going to get
So the goal is to melt the butter into the sauce, just not too quickly.
not too correctly. The term is called emulsify. If you've heard that on any of your cooking shows before, it is emulsification.
So like when we're making a mayonnaise or something.
Like
the
making
same.
very similar to making a hollandaise sauce. If you've ever tried to make a hollandaise sauce from scratch before. Okay. So now, butter. And I know I wrote the recipe for 1 stick of butter, but you might need more, you might need less. So have a little bit extra ready, because then you will add it as you need it. It's a consistency thing. And you can almost just swirl the pan.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
You keep them coming. You've got some good questions. If we can't find tilefish, what other fishes would be a good substitute here?
Mahi-mahi, some grouper. It's not a Florida fish, but monkfish would be really, really great in this dish because it's thick and meaty. But use whatever fish you like. I mean, that's a good thing about cooking. So if you don't like this fish right here, you can very easily get some tilapia or whatever fish that's available for you. I mean, you could use salmon too. Same concept, but if you like salmon, use salmon. Same searing and roasting process. So you can see the cold butter is making the sauce kind of creamy, and it's going to get thick a little bit at a time. We got a lot more butter to go. If it gets too hot and it breaks, you'll know it will look like melted butter, but that's okay. It's still good. You just put it on mashed potatoes, and nobody will ever know.
Question in the back, yes. Is there any way to fix a broken sauce?
For beurre blanc, no. Like if you break a hollandaise sauce, yes, there's lots of little tricks. But for beurre blanc, you just kind of got to start over.
But as you said, if it still tastes good and you're not serving it to impress anybody, then just, we have time for one last question. I think, did I see a hand in the back? Yes, ma'am. How do we, if we get a Brussels sprouts and they taste bitter, how can we counteract that?
I think your Brussels sprouts are bitter because they were picked too early. You can try soaking them in, like cutting them so you can expose the inside and soaking them in a little bit of salt water to help pull out some of that sulfur compound. That might help. The roasting will probably help a lot too if you decide to roast them. I shredded mine, but you could very easily cut them in half or quarters and roast them, and that caramelization will help decrease the bitterness as well.
All right, well, let's see. Can we let's see the finished product? Now, we've
Let's
already
see.
eaten all of our finished products, so maybe we need a reminder of exactly what it looks like.
So you can see the Brussels sprouts, and you can get them as crispy. Sorry, camera guy. You can get them as crispy as you want. So you could even get them to this stage right here and then put them away and then reheat them for just a few minutes right before your party.
And as you said, these are such great fall flavors, so I love
are.
that it's a perfect dish for fall.
There they are. So there's lots of different theories on how to plate. I like food stacked, okay? And that's my philosophy. Some chefs will spread it out. Some people will put it out in a line. But however you do it, you need to remember that the point of how you put it together needs to work for the food. So if you are going to need something to stay very warm, you probably want to keep it closely compact. If you're serving like a clam chowder, which is going to be super hot and thick, you might want to use a bigger plate so it has a chance to cool off just a little bit. We always eat with our eyes first. And maybe you guys are probably eating with your nose first because you can smell all of this.
So we start with the farro just on the bottom.
This is my interpretation.
This is how you like to do it.
This is
Okay.
how I would do it.
I you're making this for a fancy party and you want to look chefy.
Right. And I made a little dribble, which is fine. And then on top of that, I'm going to put the fish carefully.
As Chef Jennifer is finishing up, let's give a round of applause to our great culinary team here, Justin on stage and backstage and upstairs. They do such a great job. Our servers and hostesses who make everything perfect for you guys, and our AV team as well, who just make everything so seamless and run so smoothly.
So the question about fish, and I will actually take apart a piece of fish here for you to see what it means, but you see how I can just pull it apart, and it's going to come apart in big flakes, and it's still juicy? So for me, that's a perfectly cooked piece of fish right there.
And Chef, will you be able to stick around for a couple questions afterwards? Okay, great. So if you have any other questions, you can come right up here.
Put a couple little pieces right here.
Looks beautiful.
And then we will put
our lovely crispy Brussels sprouts. I think even maybe my daughter might enjoy those because she loves the crispy bits of vegetables. So I could just trick her and make all crispy bits, and then maybe she'd eat the Brussels sprouts.
So the lemon sauce. And if you're the chef, you know what? However you do it, that's the proper way. As we learn, the proper answer is always, yes, chef. You want me to do what? Yes, chef. So your butter sauce, as much or as little as you want. I like it on top of the fish so it kind of soaks in just a little bit. And then your Brussels sprouts, maybe as a little garnish on your plate.
It looks beautiful. Anybody thought they didn't like Brussels sprouts and maybe tasted them today and enjoyed them? Yeah, okay. See, you've got 2 converts in the back. That's
yay!
And that little bit of jam is such a nice little bit of sweetness. That was perfect on there. How about one more big round of applause for Chef Jennifer Denlinger. Took me a couple tries. Thank you so much for being here, Chef, and sharing this beautiful dish.
Thank you guys for coming. I'm so excited that you were able to come and enjoy this fall experience with us here at Disney's EPCOT Center and the Food and Wine Festival, and always a little parsley. Garnish your plate.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you guys have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.